My friends, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, and write a comment, and we begin. Part 1. The Promised Future. Chloe, my kid sister. She was a force of nature, a walking, talking, singing hurricane of pure, unadulterated talent. Seriously, that girl had a voice that could make angels weep, or at least bring a lump to the throat of even the most jaded karaoke judge. From the moment she could string 2 words together, she was belting out show tunes and pop hits with a power and grace that defied her age. It wasn't just the range or the perfect pitch. It was the emotion, the raw, unfiltered passion that poured out of her with every note. I'm not just saying this because she's my sister. Chloe had that it factor, that undeniable spark that set her apart. She was born to perform, to command a stage, to captivate an audience. Her entire life revolved around music. She was in every school play, every choir, every talent show. She practiced for hours every day, honing her craft, pushing herself to be better, more expressive, more powerful. And she had a dream. A big, audacious, glittering dream to attend the prestigious American Conservatory of Music in New York City. It was the place for aspiring vocalists, a hallowed hall where legendary singers had trained and launched their careers. It was Chloe's Mecca, the North Star guiding her every move. She'd been sketching the school name in her notebook as early as 2nd grade. I, on the other hand, was the more grounded, practical one. I loved Chloe fiercely, and I was endlessly proud of her talent, but I knew that dreams didn't always come true. I was academic, methodical, and ambitious in a different way. While Chloe was chasing stardom, I was focused on scholarships, internships, and building a solid foundation for my future. I went to a state school with my hard work, and I was determined to make the most of the opportunity. We were a tight-knit family, and we'd always looked out for each other. Mom and Dad had instilled in us a strong sense of loyalty and mutual support. We were a team, and we faced everything together, big or small. Our family has always been there for each other, regardless of how painful the task may be. When it came to higher education, my parents, bless their hearts or not, as it turned out, always talked about our future being the most important thing. They'd saved diligently for years, stashing away money in a college fund. It wasn't a massive amount, but it was enough to make a real difference. They assured both of us time and time again that if we got accepted into our dream schools, the money would be there to help us make it happen. Chloe, despite her talent, wasn't exactly the academic type. She excelled in the arts, but she was more focused on rehearsals and auditions than on textbooks and exams. I knew she was going to be excited if things started to go well, and if my parents held their promises. I had earned a full scholarship to a state school, the plan being that the funds that my parents had saved would then go to Chloe, allowing her to pursue her dreams without the burden of crippling debt. It was a plan we had all agreed on, a plan that seemed foolproof, a plan that would give both of us the best possible start in life. The day Chloe got her acceptance letter from the conservatory, our house erupted in cheers. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, and the golden sunlight streamed through the windows as Chloe ripped open the envelope, her hands trembling with anticipation. She had auditioned months ago, and the acceptance was a dream come true. I was also excited for her. When she read the words, "We are pleased to offer you admission," a wave of relief and joy washed over her face. She burst into tears, hugging the letter to her chest as if it were a winning lottery ticket. The conservatory offered her a partial scholarship, covering a portion of her tuition costs, which was enough to get her to school, but she'd still need to cover room, board, travel expenses, and living expenses in one of the most expensive cities in the world. It was a hefty sum, a daunting financial burden, but we had the college fund. Or so we thought. The excitement that ran through us would soon change. "Don't worry, sweetie," my dad said, beaming at Chloe, his eyes shining with pride. "We've got this covered. You're going to New York, and you're going to shine. We're going to make sure you have everything you need." Mom squeezed Chloe's hand, tears welling up in her eyes. "We're so proud of you, honey. This is your dream, and we're going to do everything we can to help you make it come true." She always talked about her dreams to everyone. I was thrilled for Chloe. It seemed like everything was falling into place, that all of our hard work and sacrifices had finally paid off. She was going to New York, she was going to attend her dream school, and she was going to fulfill her destiny. I could not be happier. Then came the financial aid forms, and the tuition deposit deadline, and the harsh reality check that hit us like a ton of bricks, shattering our illusions and exposing the ugly truth that lay beneath the surface. Little did Chloe and I know, this day would mark the beginning of a devastating betrayal and the unraveling of our seemingly perfect family. Part 2: The Empty Account. The initial euphoria after Chloe's acceptance slowly began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The problem was the money. Mom and Dad were being strangely evasive about it, deflecting our questions with vague assurances and dismissive comments. I started to get worried when my parents did not want to give Chloe the money that she needed to get to college. "It's all taken care of, sweetie," my mom would say, waving her hand dismissively. "Just focus on getting ready for New York. We'll handle the finances." Dad would chime in with a hearty, "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. We're working on it. There's just some paperwork involved." They'd made excuses about paperwork, delays, and transfer fees, but their eyes wouldn't meet mine. They were always a family that communicated openly and honestly, or so I thought. This sudden secrecy, this constant deflection, was completely out of character, and it set off alarm bells in my head. I tried to reassure myself that I was being paranoid, that there was a perfectly logical explanation for their behavior. But the more they avoided the topic, the more convinced I became that something was terribly wrong. I started to press them, gently at first, then more insistently. "Mom, Dad, Chloe needs to pay the tuition deposit by next week," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and measured. "We need to know how much is in the college fund so we can figure out the payment plan." They shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding my gaze. "We're working on it, honey," Dad said, his voice strained. "Just give us a little more time." "Time for what?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "What's the problem? Why are you being so secretive?" Mom sighed, her eyes welling up with tears. It's complicated, Sarah. There's been some unforeseen circumstances." "Unforeseen circumstances?" I repeated, my heart sinking. "What does that mean?" Finally, after weeks of mounting pressure, my relentless nagging, and the looming deadline for Chloe's tuition deposit, they cracked. They sat us down in the living room, their faces pale and drawn, and confessed the truth. They admitted that the college fund was gone. My world tilted on its axis. The floor fell out from beneath my feet. The air seemed to thin, making it difficult to breathe. I felt a surge of nausea rise in my throat. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" I demanded, my voice barely a whisper, my words laced with disbelief and horror. "How can it be gone?" My dad, his face ashen, stammered something about investments and a bad market. He spoke in hushed tones, his words stumbling over each other, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was saying. My mom, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen with tears, mumbled something about trying to make more money for the family and wanting to secure our future. Her voice was weak and apologetic, but her explanations felt hollow, flimsy, and utterly unconvincing. You spent it," I said, the words catching in my throat, a realization dawning on me, a chilling understanding of the depths of their betrayal. "You used it for something else." The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of Chloe's stifled sobs. They couldn't meet my gaze, their eyes filled with shame and guilt. The truth, as I was slowly beginning to understand, was far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The bank statements, which I demanded to see, had been altered, manipulated to conceal the truth. The reality, as I pieced together from fragments of conversations and furtive glances, was that they had spent the money, not on a wise investment, not to better our lives, but on themselves. A shiny new car that Dad had been coveting for months. A lavish vacation to Europe that they had never told us about. A ridiculous renovation project on the house that they never consulted us on and that no one actually wanted. They had spent what was supposed to be Chloe's future, her dreams, her chance at a life that they had always promised her. Chloe was devastated, crushed beyond words. She had always been a dreamer, an optimist, a believer in the power of hope and hard work. But even she, with her unwavering spirit and boundless enthusiasm, understood the gravity of the situation. Her dream, the dream we'd all shared, was slipping away, vanishing like smoke in the wind. "We'll figure it out, honey," I said, forcing a smile, trying to sound optimistic, even though I felt the pit in my stomach growing larger with each passing second. "We'll find a way to make this work. We'll do whatever it takes." But deep down, I knew that the road ahead was going to be long and arduous, fraught with obstacles and setbacks. And I also knew that the trust between us and our parents had been irrevocably broken, the foundation of our family crumbling before our very eyes. The idea that my parents would stoop so low and that I had been blinded was devastating. Chloe would either get her dream, or I would have to go through with everything and see her dream happen. Part 3. The confrontation. The shock had worn off, replaced by a seething white-hot anger that consumed me from the inside out. It wasn't just the loss of the money. It was the betrayal, the deception, the sheer callousness of their actions. They hadn't just stolen Chloe's dream. They'd stolen our trust, our sense of security, the very foundation of our family. I felt like everything I had believed about them, about us, was a lie. The anger was a fire burning inside me, threatening to incinerate everything in its path. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything else. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces, their expressions shifting from guilt to defensiveness, their words ringing hollow and empty. I felt betrayed, not just by my parents, but by the very fabric of our family. They had lied to us, they had cheated us, and they had stolen from their own daughter, all in the name of their own selfish desires. It was unforgivable. I knew I had to confront them. I couldn't let them get away with this. I couldn't let them pretend that everything was okay, that this was just a minor setback, a temporary inconvenience. I needed them to understand the magnitude of their actions, the depth of the pain they had caused. I waited until the next morning after Chloe had left for school to confront them. I needed to be alone with them, to have a frank and honest conversation, without the fear of further upsetting my sister. The silence of the house was thick with tension, the air heavy with unspoken accusations. I found them in the kitchen, Mom washing dishes at the sink, Dad reading the newspaper at the table. They looked up as I entered, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. I didn't waste any time. "How could you?" I said, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "How could you do this to Chloe? How could you be so selfish? How could you lie to us for so long?" They tried to downplay it, to minimize their actions, to make excuses for their behavior. They talked about the sacrifices they'd made for us over the years, the burdens they'd carried, the difficult choices they'd had to make. They spoke about wanting to provide us with a good life, wanting to secure our future, wanting to give us everything we deserved. But I wasn't buying it. Their words were meaningless, hollow platitudes designed to deflect blame and minimize their culpability. The evidence of their betrayal was too stark, too undeniable. Their faces shifted between pride and betrayal. "You promised her," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but laced with steel. "You promised her that she could go to her dream school. You promised her her future. You looked her in the eye and told her that everything would be okay. And then you stole it all away from her." My dad exploded, his face turning red with anger. "You're being so dramatic, Sarah. We didn't steal anything. We just made a few adjustments to our financial plan. It's not the end of the world. She can still go to college. She can still have a good life." My mom started crying, her voice cracking with emotion. "Please, Sarah, you have to understand. We were just trying to do what we thought was best for the family. We didn't mean to hurt anyone. You are selfish and did not think about anyone else. You spent my dreams. How could you ruin our family? I don't even think I know who you are anymore." Then I said the words I thought I'd never say. "What about me? What about my education? What about all the sacrifices I made so that Chloe could pursue her dreams? You promised me that I would have a good education as well. But what about what happened to me? I am the one that got all the scholarships." I reminded them of all the times I had foregone opportunities, turned down invitations, and worked tirelessly to support Chloe's ambitions. I reminded them of the hours I had spent tutoring her, driving her to rehearsals, and cheering her on from the sidelines. I reminded them of all the promises they had made to me, promises that now seemed hollow and meaningless. "You could get your degree anywhere," said my mom, her voice rising in anger, defending their actions as if I was somehow being unreasonable. "It doesn't matter where you go to college. What matters is what you do with your life." "Yes, it matters," I snapped, my patience finally snapping. "It matters that you lied to me. It matters that you cheated me. It matters that you devalued my dreams just because they weren't as flashy or glamorous as Chloe's. We are selling her dream. You act like we don't matter. You acted like we did not deserve the same love or education." I screamed, my voice raw with emotion, tears streaming down my face. "How could you do this? How could you betray us like this? How could you be so cruel?" The carefully constructed facade of our family had finally crumbled, exposing the ugly truth that had been lurking beneath the surface for so long. They cared more about themselves, and their actions hurt me and Chloe. They hurt our family. In that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The trust was gone, the love had been tainted, and the future I had envisioned for myself, for Chloe, for our family, had been irrevocably destroyed. I stood in silence, knowing there was one thing left for me to do. Then I knew what I had to do. If my parents wouldn't fix it, I had to. Part 4: The Plan. The house felt suffocating. The air was thick with resentment, and the lingering scent of broken promises. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. I needed to escape, to clear my head, to figure out a way to salvage Chloe's future. I grabbed my keys and phone and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for hours, the landscape blurring past in a haze of anger and frustration. I replayed the confrontation with my parents over and over in my head, each time fueling my rage and solidifying my resolve. I knew I could count on my friends and Chloe, but my parents? I couldn't rely on my parents to fix this. They were too deep in denial, too consumed by their own selfishness, too blinded by their own flawed logic. They were the problem, not the solution. I knew it was up to me, and only me, to save Chloe's dream, to find a way to get her to New York, to make sure she had the opportunity she deserved. I pulled over to the side of the road, the setting sun casting long shadows across the fields. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts, to focus my energy on finding a solution. I had to come up with a plan. A viable, actionable plan that could generate enough money to cover Chloe's expenses. It felt like an impossible task, a Herculean feat that was beyond my capabilities. But I refused to give up. I owed it to Chloe, and I owed it to myself to try. I started brainstorming, mentally listing all the resources at my disposal. I had a good job, even if I had little work experience. I could pick up extra shifts, work overtime, sacrifice my weekends and evenings to earn more money. I did get a lot of shifts, but it was only a little bit of money. But would that be enough? I already had rent and student loans. It wasn't going to be enough to cover her cost of attendance. I'd always been a good student, dedicated and hardworking, but now I knew that if I really wanted to make this plan work, I'd have to find a way to make a lot of money and make it fast. What did I have to offer? Were there any skills I possessed that could be monetized? Any talents I could leverage? I could tutor other students. But my parents would want the money from that. I thought about the most valuable thing my parents had that could be sold. They didn't have much. They had drained their savings to fund their lavish lifestyle, leaving us with nothing. The car was leased, the house was mortgaged, and their possessions were mostly worthless trinkets and outdated appliances. But I knew how valuable the information they held could be. They had always been discreet, secretive about their business dealings, careful to protect their privacy. But I knew enough to understand that they had connections, that they knew people who were involved in less than reputable activities. They had talked on the phone in code, and I had often overheard information from them. It had never mattered, until now. I remembered snippets of conversations, fleeting glimpses of documents, hushed whispers about deals and transactions. It was a long shot, a risky gamble, but it was the only thing I could think of that had the potential to generate the kind of money we needed. I had to think of Chloe. I had a lot of friends, close friends I had made over the years, friends who believed in me, friends who trusted me. They needed help with a lot of the activities my parents were doing and the connections I had. I knew a few would do what it took to help me, and it would also solve their problems. I could use the money that my friends could give me, and also the money my parents would be giving the other folks. I could solve two problems with one stone. I knew I was good at taking care of myself, at making difficult decisions, at navigating complex situations. I was resourceful, resilient, and determined. And now it was Chloe's turn. It was time for me to step up, to take control, to do whatever it took to make her dream a reality. I trusted my friends knew what to do. I decided to do something that would truly shock my parents. Something they wouldn't see coming. Something that would make them realize the gravity of their actions, the consequences of their betrayal. The only way Chloe could get to school would be if I had a plan to get a hold of a lot of money. What my parents did was wrong, and there was something I had to do about it. I told them that I was leaving, that I was moving far away from their lies and their deception. I was not their daughter. I did not have to listen to their lies and games. That I would do whatever I needed to do. The next step was a simple one. Make them happy. That will leave our lives, and we will be able to live our lives happily without your shadow in the way, said my mom with a sigh. They wanted me gone, and that was okay, because now I could work freely. I knew that was not going to be the case. I needed to make them believe that they were finally free from my presence. The only way was to leave and trust my friends. The storm of anger and determination was gathering within me, ready to unleash its full fury on those who had wronged us. Part 5. The shocking reveal. I disappeared for a few weeks, slipping away from the suffocating confines of our family home and immersing myself in a world of shadows and secrets. I told my parents that I was going to the mountains, seeking solitude and clarity, needing time to process everything that had happened. They feigned concern, but I saw a flicker of relief in their eyes, a sense of freedom now that I was no longer around to challenge their decisions or question their motives. In reality, I wasn't in the mountains. I was working closely with my friends, orchestrating a meticulously planned operation designed to expose my parents' lies and reclaim what they had stolen from Chloe. I had a long and important relationship with those friends, and I had asked them to help. I laid low for several days, meeting with my contacts, gathering information, and solidifying my strategy. I spent hours poring over documents, reviewing financial records, and piecing together the puzzle of my parents' deceitful dealings. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. Their greed knew no bounds. My contacts did what was needed to be done. I kept in contact with Chloe, offering her words of encouragement and reassurance, promising her that I would do everything in my power to make her dream a reality. I couldn't tell her the details of my plan for her own safety, but I wanted her to know that I was fighting for her, that I wouldn't rest until justice was served. I knew this was a high-stakes game, a dangerous dance with forces beyond my control. But I was willing to risk everything, to sacrifice everything, to make sure that Chloe had the opportunity she deserved. My parents were going to get their just desserts. Then, after weeks of careful planning and meticulous execution, I was ready to return. My parents, now ensconced in a lavish new home that they had purchased with the embezzled funds, looked surprised to see me. The old house was now completely empty. The car was gone. All signs of our past had been erased, replaced by a facade of wealth and prosperity. The lavish renovations would be what brought them down. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" said my mom, her voice laced with a mixture of suspicion and apprehension. "We thought you were in the mountains." I smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent a shiver down her spine. I said, my voice soft but firm. I needed some time to think, to clear my head. And now I'm back. "I have a surprise for you." "What is it?" said my dad, his eyes narrowing, sensing that something was amiss. "We have some people that want to see you, in case you wanted to go to a restaurant," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "They're very interested in your financial arrangements." As if on cue, a team of law enforcement officers, led by a stern-faced detective, entered the house, their presence filling the room with an aura of authority and dread. Their faces reflected no sympathy. "What's going on?" said my dad, his face paling with alarm. "What is this about?" "You did this," he said, turning to me, his eyes blazing with fury. "You betrayed us?" After everything we've done for you. Yes, I said, my voice unwavering, my gaze fixed on his, and I had nothing to do with the home. I could see the shock in their eyes. Their faces became paralyzed and they looked at each other. They were lost. The college fund was embezzled to fund this entire home. These renovations, your new car, your lavish vacations. I continued, my voice ringing with righteous indignation. The people in the mountains weren't hikers or tourists. They were investigators, gathering evidence of your crimes. You're going to have to answer for your actions. I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper, my eyes filled with a cold, unyielding fury. You are going to jail, I said, for stealing Chloe's dream, for betraying our family, and for stealing my education and everything I did to get there. I am going to see Chloe get her dream, even if it's the last thing I do. They were speechless, their faces pale with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and regret. They were utterly defeated, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. They had been so consumed by their own selfishness, so blinded by their own greed, that they hadn't seen this coming. But their daughter came. The police handcuffed them, leading them out of the house and into a waiting patrol car. As they were driven away, I watched them go, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I had achieved my goal, but the victory felt hollow, tainted by the knowledge that I had destroyed my own family in the process. Chloe went to her dream school, flourished in her studies, and blossomed into the talented and confident young woman I always knew she could be. She worked hard, excelled in her classes, and eventually landed a coveted role in a Broadway production, fulfilling her lifelong dream. I, meanwhile, worked hard, saved my money, and built a successful life for myself, finally getting the education that I had always wanted. It wasn't the path I had originally envisioned, but it was my own, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the strength of my convictions. My parents, meanwhile, were in prison, serving time for their crimes. They hadn't just stolen a college fund. They'd stolen our trust, our family, our future. And for that, they had paid the ultimate price. Years passed. I visited them a few times, but the conversations were strained, awkward, and ultimately unsatisfying. They couldn't understand why I had done what I had done, why I had betrayed them. They still saw themselves as the victims, as the ones who had been wronged. But I knew the truth. They had reaped what they had sown. And their words, their faces, their actions would haunt them forever. And as for me, I had found a way to move on, to rebuild my life, to create a future filled with purpose, meaning, and the unwavering love and support of my sister. The future I planned with Chloe and my friends was perfect.